You mean that's a wet down?
I just need. So let's start. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for making it to this very early morning session on HLP and durable solutions. And we're also happy to greet the people who are online. So can anybody just confirm that you're hearing us well? Okay,
yes,
thank you. That's perfect. Thank you. And good that you're also on online, Beirut, because you're one of our online presenters. So welcome everybody in the room. And I'm Stephanie Luz from the Global Shelter Cluster. And I'm very happy to hand over straight away to Jim from the Global Protection Cluster AOR on HLP to give some introduction words.
Hi all, thank you for being here. So yeah, my name's Jim Robinson. I'm the co-coordinator of the Housing, Land and Property Area of Responsibility. Yeah, great to be here with you. Some of you I know joined our session yesterday, and if you're interested to find out more about recording land rights, then talk to us. We can share the recording with you if you didn't make it. Really pleased to be able to work closely with the shelter cluster. So the HLP AOR is part of the protection cluster, but we work closely with our shelter colleagues, with CCCM colleagues, and increasingly with people working on food security, livelihoods, anything where people come into contact with housing, land, property, which we would say is pretty much everything, but it's definitely an ongoing sort of like effort to try and help people think through HLP issues to make sure their programming is more effective and leads to better outcomes for those affected by crises. So today is really great session bringing together some thoughts on that, like how does HLP issues contribute to emergency shelter programming, but how do we also make sure we're thinking about the link between that and longer term solutions? And we sort of talk a little bit about HLP as this sort of golden thread that kind of weaves its way through all different parts of a response. It looks different at different times, whether it's emergency or transitional shelter, or whether it's looking at reconstruction and rebuilding, but there's often HLP questions there, and so we really want to see people able to ask those questions and work out what that means in the context they're working in. And we accept and acknowledge that this can be quite a technical issue. It can sometimes be an acronym that puts people off and can seem like a legal area that is inaccessible. And so we're trying to think about ways to make sure it's clearer to understand what it means to ask those questions about who can be here, how do we make that more secure, and try and think through what that looks like. So today we are having sort of a bit of a tour around some of the programs and places where people are working. We're going to visit Ukraine, Yemen, South Sudan. We're also going to get to have a look at an interactive training module, which our shelter colleagues have developed as well. And as this is a hybrid event, we have the usual housekeeping type things in place. So if you want to ask a question, you're very welcome to do so. I'm sure you'll be welcome at the point to raise your hand, but we will also have a time for that later on as well. So you can note down questions, you can write them in the chat. For some people, you might prefer to join online, even if you're in the room, to be able to be on the chat as well. You're very welcome, and feel free to raise your hand or somehow get our attention. Maybe you can sort of jump up or do a dance or whatever it is. But we want this to be, an interactive time as well. So please do share your thoughts and your views. That's it from me. I'm going to pass over to Stephanie to take us through the agenda, and over to you.
So instead of taking you through the agenda, I'll actually introduce you to our first speaker. We have Iberia Lopez. Sorry, after the introduction words from him. So our first panelist, maybe I should put it like this. So after the keynote, the first panelist, Iberia Lopez, who is the global spokesperson for HLP for the Global Shelter Cluster, but he's also the HLP advisor for IOM. So Iberia, handing over to you.
Thank you. I was just going to ask if you can just introduce or let us know who's going to speak in terms of the case study they're going to have presenting today.
Okay, so the order is to
Sorry, we also have a note from the chat if we can orient the camera to the speakers, not the
How do we
audio.
do that? I think honestly, it's probably your camera.
Oh, it's mine. No?
Ah, okay. Yes. Okay, and maybe. Put it up
so easy.
Might be a little bit terrible.
Oh, that's it.
There we go.
Okay,
How about that?
thanks a lot. Good comment.
That's the, it's you we want to see, but you're going there.
But you can, yeah, you can stand here.
What were you wanting to know, Vera?
The order of the speakers.
Yeah, what's gonna happen in this session?
So first we have you speaking, and then we have DRC, Barbara McCollum, speaking on the Ukraine project on HLP, and we also have Belarus, who will be presenting as well from the country perspective. Then we have Tani, also Ukraine. It's also Ukraine. And then we have Jim and an expert from Yemen,
Yeah, colleagues from Yemen.
Jim from MRC, who will actually have a sort of dialogue about this Yemen case, so HLP. And then we have Melina Holder, who will actually introduce the South Sudan operations. And then hopefully we will still have some time for question and answers. So as case studies, we have Ukraine, Yemen, and South Sudan.
Okay. And then a bit of interactive training, exploration with Ina.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming to the HLP sessions today. I don't think there'll be a lot of overlap from the HLP session from yesterday, but if there is, you won't be losing anything. So I just wanted to tell you a story today as a way of introducing the theme of HLP and durable solutions. The story about Yemen. So in Yemen, there are several camps, and one of these camps that spontaneously crop up was in the middle of nowhere, in a deserted area with no water and no markets and no infrastructure. And the land in that camp was deemed to be tribal land, so it supposedly belongs to one of the tribes in the area, but they didn't have much interest in dealing with that situation because they thought the land had no value. It was the desert. And the camp was there, and then the humanitarian response saw that people needed water, so we needed to do a water supply system for the camp. And have a high slope, a little hill inside. So they built this water supply system and then negotiated that with the tribal representatives, and they said, yeah, you can do it. And everyone else said it's okay. The government said it's okay. So they built it. It's beautiful. It's solar powered and provides water to the whole camp and some neighboring areas for irrigation as well. Well, it turns out that once they did that, the land increased in value. Surprise, surprise. And so what happens is that then the tribal leaders, the tribal owners of the land, came to talk to us and say, wait, now this land, I have an interest in this land. Now that all those plans that you had to upgrade the tents into more durable shelters, we are not sure we want that, because we want to make sure that we can kick these people out when we need it. And then other negotiations ensued. But I think the lesson that stayed was that part of the due diligence that was not done was the diligence about the consequences of our interventions. But many times when we do what we call due diligence, which is verifying who owns the land, but also verifying the history and the dynamics around the land, we don't do it specifically to the interventions that we're planning to do on the land. And that's a crucial part of making sure that the use of the land is going to be sustainable. Be able to use the land and make plans for the future and give enough stability and predictability to the people living there so that they can become self-reliant. And And I think that that's the goal here when you talk about HLP and durable solutions is that HLP and increasing tenure and make sure people have strong tenure is one of the ways where you can create the environment for enabling the self-reliance. So getting people out of the aid dependency passes by increasing the security of tenure. And I think that's where these things meet. And I'm hoping to see examples of that as well in the next presentations. So thank you again for coming. And if you have any questions, you can ask them to the rest of the panel because I'm going to sit and watch the presentation.
Thank you very much, Ibera. And maybe what I would propose, we maybe have 2 or 3 of our speakers, and then we have a short break to give you room for asking those questions, so we don't line up all questions to the end. Maybe after Barbara's presentation, we can take some questions on both presentations and intervention then. Okay, now let's go to. Yes, let me introduce you formally. So welcome, this is Barbara McCallan, who's the Global Advisor on HLP for DRC, the Danish Refugee Council. Welcome. Thank you.
So I saw on the program that, we have 5 minutes each, me and Behrooz, and that's a total of 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm going to do 6. I know I'm not within that, but it's 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm just making the best of it. Sorry. Yeah, I'm putting the thing because I tend to speak too much. Okay, so I like having a bit of paper, and of course I spilled water on it. So I'll do my best. Okay, so since the event is about HLP, shelter from emergency to durable solutions, with Behrooz, we thought we would tell you about the DRC experience in Ukraine. And so Behrooz, I'm going to talk about a legal aid project with an HLP component to support multi-sectoral response. And Behrooz, who is the co-coordinator of the Ukraine Shelter Cluster, is going to present a position paper that the Ukraine Shelter Cluster issued on adequate housing, which looks precisely into these issues of how to adapt shelter response in countries where you have 2 different types of situations, emergency in some areas and more, transition towards more durable shelter and adequate housing. Next one. So this project that I'm going to present, integrated programming on HLP in Ukraine, the interest of it is that it's a multi-sectoral intervention supporting light to heavy repairs on new construction for a total of 940 households in the 2 areas of Luhansk and Donetsk. It's a project that was funded by GIZ and that was implemented back in between 2016 and 18. So that was before the current conflict. So the interest of it is that it shows how integrated programming and multi-sectoral response increases the impact of the humanitarian intervention and also contributes better to promoting durable solutions. Where did you remove my?
No. I just stopped.
And the other dimension that's interesting for me in this project is the legal aid component that was really essential in enabling shelter assistance. So next one,
You just say if it's.
so now you can tap the icon. So that's all the sectors that were involved within DRC for this response. Shelter, protection, legal aid, and mine action. Next one.
Yes.
Yes. Should I try that?
I did.
That's interesting. Normally it works.
So let me.
Maybe if you click on the
Maybe I could.
Okay, I'll continue because there's 3 minutes left. So shelter, protection, legal aid, and man action. The shelter was, again, like I said, light, medium, or heavy repairs. New construction for 34 flats, and the new construction was precisely, that's it, stop. That was precisely the areas where it was a bit more complicated because in terms of regulatory requirement, it was much more intense. Then each sector had a different role. Next. Protection was involved to participate to the beneficiary selections based on protection criteria. And there was a lot of individual follow-up, initial action and then follow-up after shelter. And lots of referral of the identified vulnerable cases to shelter colleagues. Legal aid, again, really instrumental in a context like Ukraine where there's heavy, it's a highly regulated environment, so you need a lot of paperwork before being able to proceed. And most of the work of the legal aid was precisely to sort out the HLP issues. Then finally, mine action, there was a risk of an exploded ordnance in some of the areas to be repaired. So because DRC has a mine, the mining sector, there was a lot of non-technical surveys done to make sure that that we would not engage on shelter, taking risks. So the interest was to make sure that the shelter teams could work and also that beneficiaries could return in safety. Next. So the advantage of having all these sectors within the same organization working on the same project, accelerates and facilitates coordination, but it doesn't really come naturally. So there was a need to put in place a whole process to make sure that we would know how to coordinate between the different sectors and who would do what at which stage. Next one. One interesting part was the fact that we had to, combine different eligibility criteria. Vulnerability based on protection criteria, but also technical criteria for shelter and also for demanding. Next. And then also there was a need to come up with a case management system that was common to all the sectors involved so that each sector could know at which stage they are. Like, for example, shelter needed to know how fast legal aid was advancing on this and that procedure for this case so that they could plan when to intervene. Second, next. Yes, legal aid components. So that's the point I wanted to highlight, the crucial role of legal aid in this project. Yes, first, because of doing no harm. In a context like Ukraine, if you start building without respecting the building requirements, without proper ownership documentation, there's a risk that your house will be demolished. So there was a lot. I'm not going to go. So I'm not going to list the problems, but the steps, but there was quite a lot of steps to take into account. And the reason why we needed legal is that the legal process is not necessarily part of shelter actors' expertise. So, this whole presentation is a plea for a shelter project to include a budget line and a component on legal aid. Next. You heard it, right? Legal aid and shelter. So again, that's just a few figures. But just for you to understand the complexity of the issue, the more complicated, so on average, each shelter case presented 9 different legal issues. It's a lot. And if you look at the last one, compliance with regulatory requirement led DRC lawyers to handle 25 different legal issues for the new constructions only. So that shows you that you need somebody specialized on that. Next. And yes, it makes, it takes longer time for shelter to be able to intervene once you have to go through all these steps, but it also makes it more sustainable, like the example that Yvette was giving. If you don't, yes, you'll build your shelter faster if you don't do that, if you don't do these steps, but you have more of a risk of your investment being lost because you haven't followed through. And this is just a list of all the types of documentations that the RC lawyers had to obtain. And on this, I will end and give the floor to Bedouze, who is going to tell you about, more recent document and position paper that I've just issued. Thank you.
Bedouze, let me just open your presentation just a second.
Okay.
Can you see it? Can you just?
Yes, I can see that. If you could just maximize the screen.
Over to you, Baruch. So let me maybe again also introduce you formally. Welcome, and we're very happy that you could join. Baruch Talab, who's the coordinator of the Ukraine shelter cluster. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Speakers are set on mute.
Wait. How do we?
No, it's in the computer, it's muted. So down to
It's
the
on the
right.
computer that you have to do something.
Bottom right.
Okay, you let me know when is
Again?
the time to start. And I'll
No.
Can you?
Just below the sun. Click on that one.
Okay. Can you try again? Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the help.
1,
Can
2,
you try
3.
again?
Test.
No, still
No.
Okay.
So obviously that's not it.
He's not muted here.
Ah, really? Maybe we have a. Keep saying something. I'm trying to press all the buttons which say volume.
It seems like people online can hear me, but
Can you say
people
something
in
now?
the room
It's talking.
cannot hear me.
Can you try to take your headphones off just to check if the problem is maybe on your side, not on ours?
People online can
Okay,
hear.
so it is on our side.
So what?
Okay.
Now there's an echo.
Can you hear me now?
So then.
Yes, confirm, we can hear you.
Oh, perfect.
So people online can hear you. That's already something which is good.
We can hear him, but quietly.
I think it's coming through one of the
Yeah.
computers in the
Yeah,
That's why
we could just turn that up.
yeah, we turn that up and then mute.
So, am I audible now?
Right, can we enter through your computer?
I think so, but then
Then there's an echo.
there's a massive echo.
I just wonder if we mute that. Looping round, isn't it?
So, can you hear me now?
So we don't have sound in this room, but people online have sounds.
But do you wanna, can you mute this computer?
I can mute the
And then
computer.
this one and play it off.
Okay, so try again now and we'll try via Melina's computer.
Okay. Please show me a thumbs up if you can hear me. All right, perfect. So I'm just gonna go ahead, if that's okay. I will make it really fast because we have lost a little bit of time at the beginning. So if you wouldn't mind to go to the next slide, I will start right away. Thank you. So my name is Behruz. I'm co-chair of Shelter Cluster from DRC. I just want to quickly touch on DRC activities contributing to overall coordination in Ukraine. We are part of the humanitarian country team. We are in different cluster strategic advisory groups, including Shelter. We are participating in a variety of technical working groups as well, and additionally co-chairing the Shelter Cluster. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what we do in Ukraine, to put it simply, we are responding as to an emergency situation. However, as soon as we are in this context, we immediately starts realizing there is a gap in communications and coordination between what we do in emergency and what is out there for recovery. There has been a lot of small interventions, discussions, forums here and there, but there hasn't been a formal or comprehensive approach to this matter. For addressing this issue, we started running a technical working group in Ukraine called Adequate Housing Technical Working Group. In this paper, we try to address the gap in coordinations when it comes to durable solutions, make sure that we are declaring our preparation to participate in any discussions for recovery out there, and also make sure that our concerns is being addressed while we're describing what is our mandate, what is the terminology of adequate housing versus durable solution, etc. Since this is a working group, next slide, please. One of our technical working groups partners, Caritas, was tasked to compile the number of activities that are in relation to durable solution and recovery out there for the sake of this tweak. And we divided them. We found some of the major projects out there, and we divided them into private and governmental. So you should know Ukraine is a very complex situation, like any other domain and context out there, and it's ever evolving. So the number of recovery programs out there is just beyond our capacity to identify. So once we identify the main ones, we try to understand what is the main theme in between them. Next slide, please. So we identified there are three main categories. One category is just purely about repairs. Everything that has been damaged during the war needs to be repaired. And there is a huge governmental compensation program going on in Ukraine that is taking care of that aspect. There are a lot of projects that is about building new houses, constructions, and creating dwellings for those who have lost all their belongings and housings and lands in the occupied territories. And the third one is an area-based approach where we are having an outlook of, okay, it's a multi-sectoral approach. There are houses that have been repaired, but what is in between them that needs to be also taken into consideration. So next slide, please. Here is where I'm going to be talking the most. This is our main outcome. On the first gray rectangle above, you see shelter cluster activities that have been identified by us that contributes to an adequate housing. And adequate housing is just a piece of the puzzle of durable solution. Once we have that, we can achieve durable solution. This is according to ISCS, the guideline out there, and we have been communicating that with our global cluster and sort of receive endorsement from them. And the lower rectangle has to do with all these three main topics that we talked about that is out there for recovery. And here we want to see how our activities and when and where are they connected to the activities out there. Why do we do this? We are doing this to say our activities concludes here. And after this, there is possibility for recovery actors to pick up on that. Why do we do this again? Because there's a lack of coordination out there. There is no one organization that we can go and say, this is what we're going to do. According to Global Shelter Cluster, where there is capacity for government to take the lead on that, they're supposed to do this, and we rely on them. And this is what the strategy that we're taking in Ukraine as well. However, there hasn't been a meaningful forum to discuss this as of now. There is a small blue arrow that you see on the side of this slide that shows our concern that our cross-cutting issues will transfer from our emergency response shelter cluster to the durable solution actor. So that component stays. That highlights the importance of being in sync with one another. HLP being the big component of that, security of tenure, ownership of the land. If I want to go in each of those activity in our shelter cluster activities, it will take a time, but that is part of our design for our cluster objective 3 to have cross-cutting issues, most importantly HLP component included in that. Next slide, please. Here, I just want to mention that funding, not only funding is going down in Ukraine, but the shift from a shift happens from west side of the country to the east side of the country to focus on the more frontline areas. And this has consequences that I'm going to get to in the next slides as well. So next slide, please. So these are parts of our risk and recommendations that we have identified to highlight in our papers. People will left behind, either because of the shift from west to east or from the our prioritization in response because there is a lack of funding. We need to advocate for cross-cutting issues, mainly HLP issues. How do we connect our activities to actors out there? The third one is we need to have a meaningful forum where this handover or potential handover has been spoken of and discussed. Knowledge management is also part of that. We have a lot of lessons learned from activities could be transferred to the actors. Also, the knowledge and information we have on beneficiaries that we would want to safeguard while we transfer the knowledge to the next actors. We highly recommend engagement with us to use our standards and recommendations and lessons learned. And we also want to say recovery plans are all comprehensive and important, but there is a missing monitoring and evaluation component to that. As we have seen in the field, some programs have not been successful in concluding their activities. So with that, I'm just going to go to my last slide and just highlight some of the conclusions that we have. Thank you so much. We describe our mandate as I touched on. Our mandate is emergency, and where there is capacity for the government to pick up, they have to do that. And the coordinations for the recovery actors needs to be in place. We keep the durability as a mindset for ourselves during our activities, whether it's emergency or less emergency. We always think of responding to a way that it's sustainable and environmental friendly, and it's also durable. We have clear vulnerability criteria that might differ from what is out there. This vulnerability criteria has been consolidated through our activities in Ukraine all the years that we've been here. Then we are ready to communicate that with actors out there. This document works as our next step to go to each forum and communicate our concerns with them. Additionally, I would also like to add that I touched on local authorities and development actors, that the conclusion of shelter cluster activity happens when the post-distribution monitoring has occurred and we have ensured that our activity served its purpose. And after that, someone has to pick the activity up. Capacity building is our ability to go in and educate, teach, learn, and express our concerns to anyone who needs this information. I have examples that I can talk about later on if there are questions, but I stop right here. And for the last slide, I would just want to share the link of this paper with you. Have a look if you have questions. We're very happy to answer that. Thank you. I will stop now.
Thank you very much. Now we're sort of Thank you very much. I think maybe it would be a really nice idea, Behrouz, if you could put the link to this really interesting paper. I was able to read it already online, so also people who can find the link easily, and the people in the room, of course, they can scan also the QR code. I think what your intervention really reminds us all of is that specifically looking through the HLP lens, the big HDP nexus, humanitarian development, let's say peace at this moment maybe also, but the HLP nexus in Ukraine becomes very apparent. And I think that is maybe one of the cases where I think your paper is for me like an appeal to solve that issue. And so Ukraine is a very good example because it's also a very developed context. So it's different than maybe, let's say, maybe countries or where we have crisis, but where let's say, the regulations and the policies are not so evolved yet, or there might be, well, let's say, room for other solutions as well, more individual solutions. But I think Ukraine is a very good example because, first of all, it has a broad international attention. It also has donor attention. So it actually is a good example to raise the flag that this gap is actually increasing. And that specifically speaking about durable solutions, there needs to be a clear, let's say, handover process. And this is what your paper is greatly advocating for. Thank you so much. Maybe while you're still online and we've got Melina's PC working as an interim solution, maybe we can pick up 2 or 3 questions on Iberia's intervention, Barbara's intervention, and your intervention before we then go to Jim and your discussion with your Yemen colleagues. So I don't know, I cannot see at the moment if we have people in the room. No, in the room I can see, but in the, let's say, virtual room, who would have any questions? Oh, is there anybody in the room? Wait. Okay, so Hamidullah, yes, please ask your question and maybe we'll switch again.
Good afternoon, colleagues from Afghanistan. I'm working with UNICEF Afghanistan, and I'm dealing with HLP issues. We have also a legal assistance project, not one, but in legal assistance project in 7 regions. My question was related to link of legal assistance projects that was explained by our colleague with HLP, because we have also a component on a legal assistance project. You know, in Afghanistan, there are unique problems different from other countries, like lack of a clear legal framework. But we usually collect information on access to HLP rights, HLP documents, and some conflict issues. But what is the modality there? So to just have also to use that expertise in our projects over.
Alhamdulillah, just because there was a short issue at the beginning, could you just repeat which country you're in? Afghanistan. Okay. And I'm not sure if you would like to answer now, Barbara, also Jim, Ibere, any of you? Or if not, what we could maybe do, we could also provide your contact details so that a discussion could be held on further on, but maybe you have one or two sentences you would.
I mean, just say briefly, so it's Barbara here. I mean, Afghanistan is a completely different context from Ukraine, right? But from other experiences, so just to repeat the question, make sure I got it right. It's like, how do we do legal aid, for example, in support of shelter in countries where you don't have legal documentation or registered land rights, right? So, I mean, in this case, usually you go, you try to, first you try to understand the context and what is it that people use themselves. If the land registry is not adapted, if there's no proof, or if proof have been lost, is it customary systems? What are the alternative proof of tenure or ownership that exist? But it starts with the analysis of the context to understand, who addresses disputes, who proves, and how to prove ownership. So I think that would be, and I think at some point I think it's the shelter cluster who had sort of context analysis. Maybe Jim or for each country, like a sort of country analysis.
We do have country profiles.
Yeah, that explains the sort of thing, but I leave it to Jim or Ibere.
I think Afghanistan is not one of the profile countries.
Well, next on the list.
Well, I can definitely say that UN Habitat has done a lot of work in Afghanistan on HLP rights. So Ben would probably be a good person to speak to. I don't know, Ben Flowers. If needed, we can provide the contact details.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say briefly, I mean, yeah, I agree with you exactly, but I think, I know Hamidullah a little bit, and I know he works with Ben and Christy at the moment with NRC and UN Habitat there as part of the HLP task force, and I think a lot of their work is about what is possible in that context. But the question you raise is a really interesting one, and it's something that has come up in a few different places, like what do you do in situations and settings where it's more about community-based customary approaches that maybe aren't as formalized, and that's something I know we're looking at doing some kind of joint work on and trying to draw together examples on that. So we'll be doing something through the HLPA or probably with the shelter cluster and others as well, to try and have some kind of round table on that exact issue, because it's coming up in a few different places, and I think it'd be great to see what lessons there are that we can hear from you in Afghanistan, but also from other places as well. So yeah, that was just to say that that's a thing that's coming up quite a lot.
Okay, so Hamidullah, sorry, probably we can't answer your question in details, but obviously glad to hear that Jim, you already know each other, so good. There'll be further discussions about that. So let me now hand over to Jim Robinson, who's the NRC expert, and we'll have a discussion with Yemeni's colleagues. How do we go technically forward?
So now we have, it was a classic case of the speaker wasn't on, apparently, which I'm really annoyed that I didn't check. So apologies to people in the room, I hadn't checked that. Classic. Do we want to try and use Sama, can you hear us? Would you be able to speak, and we can see if we can hear it through the speaker in the room, just because
I can. Hi, Jim,
I think,
and hi everyone. I can
to,
hear very well.
Melina, we have to do the same sort of.
Because maybe it went off again.
Only, I mean, if everyone's happy.
There was a light.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Is it on the computer? Is it loud?
No, we have to use Melina.
Yeah, no, yeah, but I was just wondering.
Did you put it in this direction?
Oh, well.
Yes.
Speak again, Sama.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
No, the light's not on.
No, okay, now we switch it off. Now.
Okay, I'm trying again to say something.
Oh, well, okay, well.
We'll just change it to you.
1 second, Sama, we'll just be right to use your computer again. Which is part of the protection cluster, but also works very closely with the shelter cluster with CCCM as well. And in fact, HLP coordination in Yemen started as a tri-cluster approach, sort of making clear the links between those different areas. And I'm just going to ask a couple of questions just to have a slightly different format, which of course would work brilliantly if the speaker was working, but will be a little bit more challenging as we are now. But anyway, so I have with me two colleagues, Samir and Sahir. Samir, I'm going to speak with you first. And we have a sort of solution for the speakers, so you will be heard. But yeah, I wanted to ask you, we've heard a little bit around how HLP integration is important, that we need to think about HLP within shelter interventions to make them effective, safe and secure. Can you tell us a little bit about how the HLP working group is thinking about these things sort of strategically, how you kind of navigate the different relationships and things that need to happen? What does it mean in Yemen to do that? So over to you.
Right. Can you first confirm that you can hear me? Yes. Okay, great. Well, great. Well, first of all, my name is Samir, and I am co-leading the HLP sub-working group in Yemen, as Jim said, and thanks for having me and my colleague Sahar, who's going to be with you in a bit today. It's great to get the space, to receive the space to talk a little bit about Yemen. Yemen is a little bit of a forgotten crisis, quote unquote. And we, of course, just like any other country, we are facing a very different kind of context. As you know, Yemen is divided. It's a very stuck situation politically, also with two different authorities that we have to deal with, one in the north, one in the south. The one in the north is very much in the headlines these days because of the Red Sea crisis. Therefore, we have, of course, very different scenario, very different circumstances to deal with. Now, with regards to your question, Jim, we do understand that business as usual does not work. And I think I can say that for all of the different contexts that all of our colleagues are working on. It's becoming more complex. The operational space generally is getting much smaller where the needs are increasing. We are hearing that from all the other clusters. We are hearing that from all of the different AORs throughout the protection cluster. But our experience shows, and it's becoming more and more visible because everyone is talking about Yemen is, reaching a kind of a peace solution, still not really concluded, but in the making. But what we are experiencing is that without really tackling HLP itself, any kind of interventions, especially when we talk about shelter, will neither have an immediate nor a sustainable impact. And that becomes quite clear to us. Yemen itself, its HLP issues are really in the DNA of the country. And it's one of the reasons why we have this conflict in Yemen. And it's one of the accelerators of the current conflict. The land management system is very weak. The modus operandi, I would say, between the Yemenis to solve conflicts is very old and it's very complex. The land governance is weak. The conflict resolution mechanisms are weak. State institutions are not existent. There is no kind of a compensation strategy or compensation system in place. And therefore, if we do not tackle HLP issues as a whole throughout all the different clusters, also with regards to durable solutions and the HDPN, we will not see any sustainable outcomes. And we have been having these discussions with other clusters, particularly with the shelter cluster. The shelter cluster has realized that if we do not tackle the matter of land ownership, I mean, very simply said, and the colleague in the beginning mentioned the Yemeni example, and it's true. We are facing that on a daily basis. If we are not being consulted from an HLP perspective from other clusters, any type of intervention will not be successful. And when we talk about financial resources and the funding levels going down, these kind of interventions will also be in vain, and this will then lead to further secondary displacement of people, etc. So we're having these discussions, and we are keen on continuing these discussions and really actually applying that on the strategic level in Yemen. I hope this answers your question, Jim.
Thanks, Samir. Thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. Now, one of the words that gets used a lot when we're thinking about development and solutions is the nexus word. So humanitarian development, peace nexus, we hear about that a lot. What does that mean for you in Yemen? Like, how does that become practical and applied? Like, what would you suggest needs to happen there, and how is it working already?
That's a very, very big question, if what I would say from my perspective. But of course, it's an all humanitarian effort, right, from all of the different agencies under the leadership of the HCT. But in general, in Yemen, we're finding ourselves in a very conceptual phase, I would say, and we are in dire need of entering this practical sphere. This can take many different shapes, many different forms. What I believe should be focused on is more of a multi-temporal dimension where we address immediate emergency needs as well as transitional medium-term strategies, and to lay the foundations for long-term resilience. Right? And on the second hand, it has to be, and I think I'm echoing also the colleagues from Ukraine, it has to be rather multi-sectorial, with a very strong coordination excuse me, between the humanitarian actors, with development partners, and with key local stakeholders that are using by using an area-based approach. So what I'm saying is that I think what we're hearing across all the different colleagues and different partners, we work in different contexts, but our approaches remain the same. We just have to adapt them slightly to the context that we're working in. But all in all, I think the direction is clear. It's like really multi-temporal, multi-sectoral, and it's area-based, because otherwise we won't be able to succeed here in a sustainable manner. I also believe that because all of the frameworks exist, right? I mean, when we talk about HDPN, we also talk about durable solutions and how they fit together, etc. Yemen has a durable solutions framework since a year approximately. HLP is a crucial part of it. And generally, I would say our goal in Yemen is really to make ourselves obsolete, right, in the end and on the long run. So from the early start of the interventions that we're doing, we need to really work on these collective cross-sectoral outcomes, really to support the long-term solutions and building the capacity of the local actors and the local partners. We've seen a lot of willingness from authorities and from local partners, but really it's really lacking skills. It's lacking capacity. We have a lot of local qualified staff that are out of the country. It's difficult to recruit the right people for the right jobs, but we need to make the key stakeholders, including the Yemenis and the Yemeni staff, really understand the importance of addressing these HLP issues, and that is the overall framework, I would say, for HDPN and then also for durable solutions. Over to you, Beck.
Thanks, Samir. Thank you for that. We have a really interesting question in the chat, which maybe we'll come back to after we've spoken to your colleague. So yeah, I'd like to turn now to Sahar. Thank you, Samir, for your comments there. Sahar, are you there? Okay. Yeah, brilliant. Excellent. Good. So please would you introduce yourself and your role?
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. So my name is Sahar Najjar. I'm the Yemen ICLA specialist for NRC, and I also co-lead the HLP working group along with Samir and May from UNHCR. Good to see you all. I'm very happy that Yemen is represented in such a global call and such forum. Thank you, and over to you.
So we've heard from Samir there some of the kind of conceptual ideas, the theory and the strategy around how we think about HLP intervention within the context of Yemen. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about some of the practical examples, because we hear that Yemen is a protracted crisis and so things change over time, but we still know that people are being displaced through like disaster, conflict that's ongoing, and also people are, moving around, some are returning, and rebuilding is happening as well. Could you tell us a little bit about what shelter assistance looks like in this context, and also where HLP kind of fits into that?
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. As you have mentioned that Yemen have been it's like now in Yemen we are in the 10th year of ongoing conflict as you mentioned, it's prolonged and protracted crisis. Yemen remain in emergency, however, with the ongoing durable solution efforts. Yes, the conflict was decreased due to the ongoing peace process. However, it was still ongoing in other areas, and displacement still ongoing due to different reasons, conflict, and also natural disaster, climate change due to the floods and rains. When it comes to integrating HLP to the shelter response, as you have mentioned previously, that shelter is very important, but also integrating HLP to the shelter response is very important. Shelter in Yemen have moved from emergency, Torpin and Bambo, to the transitional, and now it's more a transitional shelter, and now it's also moving to the rehabilitation, especially on the returns areas. HLP working group and HLP partners, and they are very limited in Yemen. We're working closely with shelter in a different stage, in a different way, and was providing a lot of HLP support. So I can bring some of the examples. So, for example, in case of eviction, and through the past 10 years, eviction was increased in all of the areas, especially because majority of the lands in Yemen where IDPs are settling, it's a private lands. So in case of eviction, HLP work closely with shelter in a different aspect. It starts from land tenure negotiation and supporting government on land tenure negotiation, securing occupancy agreement in case IDPs will be relocating to another site. We do work with the other clusters, especially shelter cluster and protection cluster, in land suitability assessment, and HLP will cover the land due diligence process and also the other HLP aspects. Also, we have worked with shelter cluster on the eviction cases with identifying alternative solution and also leading the tenure process till we secure the occupancy agreement. Also, other examples, we have worked with the shelter cluster. For example, in the returns areas, as I mentioned that the shelter response was moving from the emergency to the transitional, then from the transitional to the rehabilitation, which is a bit of a bigger package of response. HLP working group worked closely with the shelter to include and integrate HLP response within the shelter response. Also, we have worked closely with the shelter when it comes to rental subsidy support for IDPs. So we work with them on ensuring that IDPs has a rental agreements. Additional to that, the HLP working group was working with the shelter teams to build their capacities. As you might know that most of these shelters teams are engineers, which they don't know a lot about the HLP aspects that need to be in place from an earlier stage. For example, if we are moving or relocating to a new site or working in a new site, if we did not put the HLP due diligence and HLP aspects from an earlier stage, we may end up in a big issue. Like you will not be able to upgrade the type of shelter. You will not, when we speak about HLP, it's also go beyond, as mentioned by Samir and Jem. It go beyond shelter. It go also to wash and education as well. You will not be able to do latrine construction, infrastructure on anything without putting HLP aspects on place. With that, and also as mentioned by my colleague Samir, a lot of challenges is facing when it comes about to speak about HLP in Yemen. HLP funding is a bit problematic and it's underfunding. Also, when we speak about capacity building, there are a lack of expertise when we speak about HLP in Yemen. NRC have started from an aerial stage in 2018. And then when we started also, we worked closely with HLP working group and we started to co-lead. Currently, we started to expand the capacity building and to invest more on the other partners who are interested in HLP so we could have more expertise. However, the shortage of fund is hindering us to reach more. But we are planning to do to respond to that through having evidence-based advocacy that could help us to address more funding and also build the capacity of the partners. Thank you, and over to you, and I hope that I have responded to your question, Jen.
Thank you.
Also, if you Gemma, can I ask you to share the one slide that I shared it with you?
Can you
I'm not able to hear you.
interesting process with the room. But yes, please say again.
Okay, I'm sorry. It looked like I was speaking a lot, but now I want to show you a picture of one of the good examples in Yemen that it show you that the difference between if HLP is considered from aerial stage and if HLP is not considered. This example is from South Yemen, from a governorate is called Lahaj. The first picture is from Al Baytara site. This site was located on water wheels that is feeding both Aden Governorate and Lahaj Governorate. The site was like the humanitarian organization who was working on that site was for over 4 years were not able to upgrade the type of shelter, to bring in latrine services, or to invest on the site because it was not accepted by the landlord or the government. After that, NRC started to manage that site. As NRC has the ICLA department that one of their thematic area is HLP, and they are one of the HLP expertise. They started to work on that, having done a negotiation with the landlord, with the government, understanding the situation. Then we got to understand that the location, like the location itself, selecting that site to be an IDP site, it was wrong from the beginning because it's located in the water wheels that is feeding to governorate, and even investment or digging and having any sanitation system, it could affect all the population into governorate. So we have worked closely with the government for finding an alternative solution that can be suitable, and the humanitarian organizations can invest there, including NRC. We were very lucky to identify a bigger land, close from the local market. Then we have worked closely through the HLP working group and the other clusters to do land suitability assessment. After identifying the land as approved land, we did the land due diligence. We have drafted the occupancy agreement. We have secured the occupancy agreement through the HLP working group and the other cluster. We're able to mobilize the resources. NRC was the CCM partner there. NRC invested on the shelter, and in the CCM, other partners that we have worked with them through the resource mobilization invested. So we were able to do a proper type of shelter, latrine services, a good sanitation system, like a health clinic, a school. It became a real site. Then what we did, we asked the community committee to come and to see that place so they can share the same good picture with the community. The community were very happy for the relocation. Then the relocation took place. When we see the picture, we can see that people were living in a very difficult and a miserable situation. And then when HLP support was in place and all the HLP aspects was there from an initial state.
You can hear us. Sorry, we're going to have to just leave it there just because of the timing. But thanks so much for sharing the example, and you know, please do keep sharing any examples you have, like either in the chat if there's things that are written about as well. And there's a couple of questions in the chat that if you feel like you would be able to, you and Sama, maybe other colleagues can respond to by writing on there, please do. But yeah, thank you, Sahir, Sama, for joining us and for sharing a bit about Yemen. And I'm sure we'll hear more in the coming weeks. Back to you, Sophie.
Thank you, and really sorry to cut you because I think your examples really showed how impactful the work on HLP rights actually is for the people, because I think that sometimes, and someone said it at the beginning, it's seen as such a technical issue and so far away from, you know, like legal aid is also a term which sounds like so theoretic. And your example really showed what a difference it can actually make for the life of people. So thank you very much for sharing that. Let me now hand over to Melina Holder, who will speak from the room here, which is a good thing, so we won't have the technical issues, hopefully. Melina is the HLP expert at IOM and also working on a lot of projects together with the Global Shelter Cluster. So thank you very much, and let me open your presentation so that we can hopefully manage to share so that everybody can see it. And I would say over to you. Yeah, why don't you stand up so you can also sit here. And then I think people.
So I'll keep it quite quick so we have time to do the activity, but I was just going to talk about developing and implementing an HLP strategy in IOM's mission in South Sudan and how this has helped to operationalize due diligence and then ultimately link to durable solutions. So first, just to begin, what is an HLP strategy? Wait, let me put it in.
It doesn't work if you put it in presentation mode. It creates problem.
Okay. So the point of the strategy is to kind of develop a framework for integrating HLP into all relevant areas of operation in IOM South Sudan. So moving beyond shelter, seeing where it links to CCCM, WASH, community stabilization. Basically, every unit in South Sudan is engaging with HLP in some way. So kind of to create a network to make sure that HLP is integrated into all different areas of operation. So it establishes an organizational structure, and this is through having a core HLP unit, which is right now one person in South Sudan, but that has technical and legal HLP expertise, and then having HLP focal points within each unit. So building capacity within each unit, at least to do some minimum standard of due diligence, to have capacity in-house, and then more technical expertise in a central unit. So the goal of this is to build HLP capacity basically throughout the whole mission. And it also enables more context, unit, and intervention-specific HLP actions and HLP due diligence. So instead of having like a standard HLP due diligence, having tools for kind of what a WASH intervention would need for due diligence, or what to establish a temporary medical unit, because all of these would require kind of different levels of due diligence. And then ultimately the goal is just to mainstream HLP throughout the mission and throughout all areas of operation. So having the value of having an HLP strategy is firstly, saves costs. So the point is to kind of pool resources together to fund this central HLP unit. So each unit allots a small percent of their budget, and this helps fund kind of the central technical and legal support in-house. And also by building capacity to do due diligence, this can prevent having any type of implementation delays or derailing projects. So ultimately to save costs, provide scale. So by having a unit and focal points throughout the mission, you can deploy resources and support more effectively and more efficiently, and able to scale HLP actions or do more comprehensive due diligence. It increases standardization. So through the strategy, we've developed standard operating procedures for doing due diligence, or kind of what the procedures would be for referring HLP issues. So hoping to make sure that kind of the best practices are being applied throughout the mission, and also adapt and modify as needed. Enable performance management. So we've established criteria and indicators to measure how the HLP responses are going, and there's a results framework to see, to be able to improve and adapt. There's cross-sectoral integration of HLP expertise, and this is happening through the HLP focal points that are in all of the units. Strengthen HLP capacity within local institutions. So part of the strategy has a roadmap to capacity building, and this is kind of how IOM will map out local stakeholders, institutions, land ministries that are most relevant to IOM's operations, and to be able to provide more targeted training and see what are the actual needs for building HLP capacity at the institutional level, both statutory and customary. And then ultimately, this is to mainstream HLP actions and HLP support. So what's included in the strategy? There's a results framework, and this goes back to being able to measure how the implementation of the strategy is going and how the HLP response in South Sudan is being implemented. There are tools involved in the strategy, so due diligence tools, case management, which we're working on, area profiles. So in each of the different areas in South Sudan, who are the stakeholders, what are the HLP issues, what services are available, and how referrals can be made. SOPs and guidelines, as I talked about, and then training materials. So right now it's a 3-year strategy, and this is kind of all that's included in it. So how does the HLP strategy actually help to operationalize due diligence? First, we sat down with every unit in the mission to try to understand what challenges they were facing with implementation, what kind of delays they were seeing, either because of lack of HLP due diligence or issues that were coming up further down the line, and making the linkages between each unit and HLP. And then we established a central HLP unit and then asked each unit to assign a focal point. So this is someone that's already on their team. It's not new hiring. It's just having someone on their team that they're going to be the ones that will be referring issues. They'll be the ones that will be receiving training. And then asking them to allot small portions of their budget to HLP from the beginning. So making sure that those funds are there to do due diligence at the beginning. And then developing targeted and specific trainings and tools. So training each of the focal point, making sure they know within their operations and within their interventions, what HLP considerations need to be made from the very beginning. And then making sure that it's known and that there's a process for referrals. So if there's an issue that HLP focal points can't address, how this referral process will happen to the central HLP unit that's also in-house. So kind of establishing this network of HLP within the unit. And the goal of this is to be able to more proactively conduct due diligence activities and more proactively address issues, or address them before they become an issue and cause delays. So kind of the roles of the HLP focal points, it's not to create more work for team members within their units, but kind of just so they're the ones that will be first receiving trainings on HLP, especially due diligence, which we just did in February and March. They'll be consulting with their team about what their needs are for HLP, so then they can go back to the HLP unit and say, hey, this is kind of what we need, or these are the kinds of tools that we need. These are the challenges that we're facing. They'll be the ones to identify if a project requires additional HLP support. They'll be receiving the issues and needs from their teams, facilitating this referral process. And the goal is that they'll have the capacity to do due diligence and build the capacity within their own teams. Just to briefly go over what the HLP links are to the different thematic areas of operation in South Sudan. So emergency response, a lot of the focus has been to make sure that that due diligence is happening at the very, very beginning. And the team members who are most involved in emergency response have said, okay, we don't have that much time. We need like a rapid due diligence assessment. We can't take weeks to do due diligence, but what's the minimum we can do at the emergency response? So we've developed tools for that. Climate change and environment, so making sure that those kinds of climate risks to land are being considered. Gender equality, so making sure that there's HLP sensitization and capacity building in communities and also local institutions. And then durable solutions in transitional justice. So one of the key pillars in South Sudan for transitional justice are addressing HLP rights violations or reinstating HLP rights, restitution and compensation. And then the nexus, the development nexus, so making sure that there's bridging efforts between humanitarian development actors on HLP and kind of trying to address these land administration and governance gaps. There's customary law review happening that the mission is doing with institutions in South Sudan. So yeah, these are the links that we're trying to make to all the different thematic areas where IO in South Sudan is operating. So how can HLP and emergency response eventually support durable solutions? So the goal is to try to prevent evictions from the very beginning, making sure that there's some level of tenure secured in the emergency response phase. And this can happen by getting written agreements or making sure that there's community no objection letters, making sure that there's some documentation that's happening. Yeah, so it supports tenure security and then also social cohesion. So a big part of the due diligence process in South Sudan is kind of making sure that there's a strong community engagement component that's happening with sensitization, understanding community needs, and kind of increasing that network of allies and support. And then just quickly, HLP is important for durable solutions because all of the three kind of options for durable solutions, local integration, return, and resettlement, require secure access to tenure security, and that can start at the beginning from the due diligence phase. And since we've implemented the strategy, there's been 23 nominated focal points within the unit. So every single unit's nominated a focal point in Juba and also in their field teams. We've conducted trainings, we've developed context-specific due diligence tools, and the focal points have been super key to this by telling us what they need, and then we can develop accordingly. There's been an increased amount of referrals made and also increased documentation. So the focal points are coming to us and saying, okay, the community said, yes, what can you draft us an agreement? What kind of agreement do we need? So we've had more accountability. And then just there's been a big expansion of projects within South Sudan that have a stronger HLP component because of the increased capacity for HLP within the mission. So I don't have time to go over these, but and then next steps, case management. We're doing alternative dispute resolution training. We're working on doing more institutional capacity building and more unit intervention specific tools. Sorry for speaking so fast.
No, I'm actually very sorry that because of our technical problems that we had throughout this session, we're now sort of having to hurry speakers. And well, we do have only, let's say, 5 or 10 minutes left to hand over to Ina. So let me just at least make sure that you can properly introduce yourself and that we can at least introduce what you plan to say.
Great, thank you. So my name is Ina. I work on protection and HLP with IOM, and I wanted to take the last few minutes of our session, hopefully still leave a bit of room for questions at the end, on presenting a new training resource, or not so new, but still being expanded training resource. And maybe if you can go to the main page. Then we wanted to play a game with you, essentially, an interactive, presenting to you an interactive HLP training, which some of you might already know. We also dropped the link in the chat, so all of you have access to it. So this is a recent initiative by the Global Shelter Cluster, and then also involving the Protection Cluster through the HLP AOR on putting in place a training resource, online course, short to the point, interactive, gamified, that introduces, presents some of the key elements of what HLP is and how it links to our work. I'm really trying to demystify also the key concepts of HLP. So I give you a quick overview of what the training looks like. You won't be able to play, unfortunately, a module together, which I thought would have been interesting, but yeah, not to risk the technology failing us again. So I wanted to show you the quick, kind of the current catalog. We have at this point 4 modules. The 5th one is being uploaded hopefully by the end of this month. And we're also hoping to be expanding that training. So the first, so as you can see here, this is also hosted on the Global Shelter Cluster website, as well as the IOM one. So the first module looks at HLP fundamentals, looking at some of the key elements of why HLP is important. So you presented with a scenario where there's new displacement happening. You have to find space, you have to find land for internally displaced persons to be able to reside and shelter. And you then have 2 days to do that in the module itself. And you have to figure out what could be a suitable space and land to do that. So you will be looking at an apartment block, abandoned supposedly, land that lies vacant, and then you will have to engage with different people and figure out what would be the best place for them, keeping in mind security of tenure and of course protecting people from forced eviction. The second module looks at security of tenure as the key concept, of course, of HLP. I won't be able to go into great detail right now, so I'm sorry I have to be a bit rushed. Again, scenario-based, you will have to work against the clock to find a solution for displaced people in finding, secure shelter. And then the next module, which is a huge topic unto itself, looks at returns and property restitution. So more transitional justice, HLP. Melina just spoke about it in the context of South Sudan. But of course, in many conflicts, if not all, HLP rights violations are a key element. And addressing them is an absolutely integral part of any justice initiative. So this module specifically looks at restitution of property post-conflict. Again, scenario-based, and you will be dealing with lots of problems navigating this module. And And then the last one, another key issue, looks at the gender dimension, women's access to property. You'll be supporting women have been deprived of the property and trying to access their property rights. And yeah, again, after each module, you'll be able to navigate that on your own. There's different options for you to move forward. And at the end of the module, you present it a bit with an overview, learn more. Like this is what would have happened if you had clicked on this and this and that. And why didn't you look at this? Why did you maybe next time you could maybe think about this? So it's hopefully also a way to pedagogically speaking, an engaging way to learn about HLP. Each module is around 15 minutes long, so it can be can fit into your workday very easily. And we're currently working and are finalizing a 5th module, which is on protection of HLP rights and the concept of climate change. So really looking at disaster displacement and HLP considerations in responding, and also adaptation, right? Adaptation measures that have a strong HLP component to increase resilience to climate change impacts. So that's hopefully coming online by the end of this month. And yeah, I'll leave it here. I'm sorry not to be able to play this with you, but
honestly, but you have the opportunity to play some of the modules because Ina is actually holding a demonstration session every day at from 11 to 12 at the Global Shelter Cluster stand, which is sort of when you come in from the entry, sort of on the right side of things, and it's quite easy to find. So please come and see Ina there.
And the sound works, so I'm looking forward to seeing you there. And we can drop the link maybe in the chat box. So yeah, thanks for that. I'll leave it here. Any questions, let me know.
And I can really just always promote this course because I've taken them all, including the one which is upcoming, and they're really very interactive. So they're really good. They're fun to do, which I think is also an important element, actually. And yeah, they really help you understand how many difficult decisions people need to take when dealing with the topic. So I think it's a fantastic course. I can really just very much promote it. We've got 6 minutes left, which is fantastic. So I cannot see. Can I see the chat? Maybe I can see the chat. Oh, but maybe Jim, would you like? Maybe we can still have one question from the room and one question from the online audience. This is your chance. Yes, please. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Scott Westgard, Santa Barbara. I work with Hippo Rollers and Unity Water. We work with an influencer. His name is Mr. Beast. He's 25 years old. He's got 240 million subscribers globally. We are right now currently using GIS technology to map out his 104 boreholes that he drilled in Africa. We want to play with this room. We want to engage with this room. We want to be able to share your stories with his audience. So please, if you would like, grab my card, and I need all of you because truly we need to educate them en masse, and Jimmy has the opportunity to do so.
Thank you for this intervention. Is there maybe someone who has a question on HLP or any of the presentations that we've just heard? Yes, please.
I'd like to return to Barbara's point at the beginning there about the necessity of ensuring that HLP, including budgets. And my question is, how do we see that playing out? How do you proportionalize that against different contexts, and also supporting both rental support and those who are homeless?
Thanks for this question. I don't know, Jim, you're smiling, so I'll just turn over to you.
Is there a specific person who you would like to direct that to? Like, is it one of the projects, or just a general question for the room? Or
general question for the room, perhaps about.
Well, maybe we do have examples from someone in the room who actually says, well, we managed, maybe in South Sudan, you must have had a budget line for actually setting up the work and the focal points, no?
I mean, it's a good question. It obviously depends on the type of intervention that you're planning. You know, some of the projects are HLP heavy, and you need more, and some of the projects are even just HLP focused, HLP projects. But for the projects that require HLP support but are not HLP projects, what we've established as a rule is to have 0.5% at least from each of the projects, from shelters to CCM, etc., TRD, durable solutions, etc. So 0.5% of that budget dedicated to HLP, and then they can share the resources between them. So that seems to be
So 50% actually, that's what you're doing at the moment.
0.5%.
0.5%.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Just to clarify, probably many people in the
Maybe
room
that's
would be
fair.
happy if we would go up to 50.
Yeah, so I'd say, I mean, I'll just general. I think that's I had a line in terms of closing remarks. What was I going to say? And one of the lines was, how do we tell better stories about why integration is so important for effective outcomes? And because I think we need to advocate for more integration of the HLP dimension. So quite often we see, there's that question: do we outsource that to an HLP expert? Do we try and develop it in-house? And I've got my HLP AOR coordinator hat on, but also I know for NRC they like other organisations do, like DRC talking about as well. We'll draw on the expertise within the organisation to try and include that within the projects, within the responses. But I think it's also a chance where my other hat on with the HLP coordination side is where we can really try and draw and share on the resources that we each have, because there aren't enough resources really for HLP. There aren't enough resources for everything. So I think trying to coordinate and share on this stuff is super important, and is definitely what I would love to see more of. And and where we have active coordination, can we make sure those partners are engaged and like sharing, so that not only so that we get the geographical coverage, but where there is context specific expertise developed, that we can really make sure others are able to kind of like learn from that and use that and apply that. And in the best examples, we do see a real coming together of different approaches and tools to like try and get some kind of harmonized approach, and that's what we're trying to push for in a lot of different contexts. But go on, yes, Tom, you want to...
Has there been any evaluation of the cost effectiveness of doing it? HLP is saving money.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lovely leading question. And so, I mean, I think this is something we want trying to do more of. In Somalia, there's been a bit of work done to suggest that if you've done the due diligence properly, you would save a lot of money in the end. So 2022, they reckon $4.6 million was lost due to people being forced off of infrastructure, evicted from community-based elements as well, and having to lose kind of wash, shelter, community space, all of these kind of things. 2023, I think they reckon that's gone up to 5 million. It's at the moment still a little bit kind of quick and dirty analysis, and we need to work out how to really understand that better. And you're trying to sort of prove a counterfactual a little bit, so it's difficult. But I think there is a lot we can do to try and sort of evidence how actually these interventions will save resources as well as time and energy and effort, and hopefully lead to better outcomes as well. We should do a session on that next time. I did
So
see
we have one question.
Online,
Yeah, we've got one question from the room. Patience?
Yes, thank you for giving me the time. I'll try to be quick because I know we're at the end. I research humanitarian operations for my doctoral work in complex crisis, and I found this session very interesting. But I was curious, you keep talking about participation across different sectors and all of that. What do you see as really, truly value adding from an academic perspective that we could bring to this whole discussion around shelters, displacement, and finding really, truly durable solutions? So are there any gaps that you see that could be filled by academia, maybe operationally, because that's the angle that I'm struggling with, where no one in my operation space wants to talk about complex crisis because there's a political element, but I'm trying to garner sort of more involvement into that space, actually, because I feel like we have to somehow work together. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts to share with me on your perspectives on this.
Well, thanks a lot. And we do have Lizzie Barbister in the room, who is the Global Shelter Cluster focal point for research. And she flagged to me that she would like to answer to your question.
Great. Hello, Patience. Can you hear me? Hi there.
Yes, I can.
It would be great to be in touch. It's music to my ears, somebody who is both interested in durable solutions and the where HLP comes in, but also particularly in complex situations. Hello. One of our key priority themes for the shelter cluster is how we move from the initial emergency response through to something more sustainable. And that's where we really need evidence of what works. And more sort of evidence of what's going on and what the obstacles are, but also strategies for dealing with those obstacles. So I would be very happy to speak to you about this.
I would definitely reach out. Thank you.
We'll try to get you in touch one with one another. maybe, I don't know if that's very disturbing, you could either leave your contact details in the chat, or you can reach out to either the Global Shelter Cluster. On the Global Shelter Cluster website, you can find Lizzie's contact details. So maybe as we're now sort of starting to be over time, Jim, maybe some conclusion words.
I don't think I've got anything really to add to the great questions. And I mean, I love that question on the academia side, because I think it's something we've been talking about for a while. We feel like the land rights development side of things has got some really kind of established academic practice behind it. And I think there is a need for that to kind of be part of the sort of the way we look at research around humanitarian response as well. So it'd be great. And I think even just on the basic level of that kind of analysis and understanding of what the interventions can mean and how we communicate that better, I think would be brilliant. I mean, I don't have anything dramatic to say, so I think some of the questions, go on then.
Sorry, it's just an addendum to that. I just wanted to say that Melina was one of our fellows on our fellowship scheme, and she was looking at HLP, and now she's here and she's working with us and helping coordinate. And we have a fellowship scheme that people can actually apply to look at some of these issues. So it's unfortunately coming to an end soon, but we are hoping to get that agreement renewed. It's funded by BHA, but I think Melina's a great example of how doing that initial sort of piece of research can really help the wider coordination system and the wider humanitarian sector.
A living case study. It's true. And so it's great. And I think something we're trying to look at, and I know various colleagues have ideas on this, is how do we get HLP things integrated into like humanitarian training, like into the universities and the courses that do humanitarian work. And this interactive training is an example to try and push people to think about that a bit more. But I think there's definitely, something there. But I don't have anything particularly to say apart from thank you all for being here and engaging. And I mean, these questions are so good and vital. And thank you to all the speakers. Just brilliant to get your interventions. So
Same on our side, and well, already the interest in this session is a good sign, so we can all run out and spread the news about the existing tools, but also, of course, the work that partners do. And I think I'm happy that the Shelter Cluster has really, thanks to the support of the Global Focal Point in IOM as a partner, has really also taken a lot over, working in close cooperation with the Global Protection Cluster, AOR, and NRC and UN Habitat as a team leading that. Thanks very much, and have a great rest of the day, great rest of the HPNW. And we'll see you soon, maybe in other sessions.
11 o'clock, 11 o'clock to try out the training. Yes. 25 minutes, so you time to get coffee and then go straight there.
Bye, everybody.